The number you have called is not connected.
Please try again later.
No, it's please check the number and try again.
Yeah, you're right. It is. Whatever.
Welcome.
Come on, Luke. Are you all right?
I was-
You got stage fright here?
Yes. Nothing a laxative won't fix.
Where's the modafinil? Quick.
How many modafinils have you had today?
No. I'm a good influence on him.
Not allowed to enhance his round.
Let's start this shit quick.
Welcome to the Warrior Strength Cast. I'm your host, Shannon Green, and I'm here with my lovely co-host.
Lauren Green.
And on the podcast today, we have...
Dr. Luke Delvicchio.
Hello.
And Hayes Daoud.
I'm only on the podcast because I drove him here, but thanks for having me on the table again.
That's all right. We'll probably
One day you'll ask me to have my own podcast.
We'll probably cut you out with the video footage.
okay.
So we'll edit that bit out too. No, you've got a good voice.
Yeah, whatever.
We like you. You should have done your intro again. Hello and welcome.
I'm not in uniform.
Oh, that's right.
So welcome, Luke. So we brought Luke on today. We're going to speak about Masters athletes. It's a bit of a passion of his, being a Masters athlete himself.
Loose. That's a term we use very loosely. Very loosely.
Masters punter.
Master's observer.
So Luke, tell us a bit about yourself first, so people know who you are.
Yeah, certainly. So, probably going about 15 years ago, I did my first undergraduate sports science degree, Wollongong University. And at that time, when I did a degree, there really wasn't much of a pathway, an employment pathway for what we now know as an exercise physiologist. So, having completed that 3-year course, I decided then to go on and do some nutrition. So I took up a nutrition electives. And it wasn't long after I started doing nutrition because I thought, well, maybe I'll go into nutrition because there wasn't a lot of employment opportunities for someone with a degree outside of a personal trainer, which I was already a personal trainer. So, but then about halfway through picking up a few nutrition subjects with the view of going on to do a double degree in nutrition, a postgraduate diploma in rehabilitation came out, and the idea there was if you pick up that extra year, you could then go on and become an accredited exercise physiologist, because it was that point in time where the Exercise Science Association decided that they're going to create this profession.
Yeah.
It's allied health profession known as an exercise physiologist. So I jumped ship. I went over and did that diploma. So it was a postgraduate diploma in exercise rehabilitation, and started working as an exercise physiologist.
Yeah.
So it was probably a year or so into that, and I still had a passion for strength and conditioning and weight training. And a colleague of mine had just enrolled in the Masters Strength and Conditioning at Edith Cowan over in Perth. So when I heard about that, I thought, I have to get involved with this. This sounds like a fantastic applied course, given that the other coursework I'd done to date had been so theoretical.
Yeah.
This is a real applied course, a Masters by coursework. So I went on to complete that. And then completing that, I was still working as an exercise physiologist, and there was a lot of work with diabetes. So I decided I also needed to go on and become a diabetes educator because I had so many diabetic patients. So I finished the Masters and went to the UTS in Sydney, University of Technology, and did a postgraduate certificate in diabetes education and clinical management. So then I finished that, and I actually had a bit of a break from study for a while. I was working in a corporate setting at Fuji Xerox, running a corporate wellbeing program. And of course, I suppose all along the way, I was always curious in completing a PhD. It was always something I was interested in doing, and I was always sort of inquisitive, and I liked the idea of getting into a lab and actually answering some research questions. And an opportunity came up, but the opportunity was actually in Rockhampton, of all places. So, looking at the opportunity, I applied and I got in, and it meant I had to relocate to Rockhampton for a couple of years to do it. And spent 3 years in Rockhampton completing a PhD, and of course my topic of research was in Masters athletes.
Yeah, cool. Very awesome.
Old school.
Yeah.
Masters athletes.
Very old school.
And you're your wife recently competed, did she?
Very proud of my wife. She won. She brought back gold. So
Oh,
she left me
cool.
for 10 days and said, "You can go, but you've got to bring back a medal." So she went over and competed in the Masters Asian Games over there in Malaysia.
Yep.
It's held every couple of years, and she, her team, that was in hockey and field hockey, and her team won that event. Went through and won the gold medal. So
That's great.
she's come back with a gold medal, and she is a good exemplar of a Masters athlete.
You said, because we were in the Gold Coast together while she was away, so you said that she was actually even going up against some male teams as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. They had a few mixed teams. So
Yeah.
there was some. I think it was a Swiss team that had half the players were men and half were women. So there was even some.
How did they go in that one?
Yeah, they won that game.
Yeah,
they,
that's
they,
unreal.
that's what I mean.
Very
Like
good.
they're a pretty ferocious team.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's really cool.
She was telling me she even knocked a couple of them over. Some of these.
That's where you get it from. Tiny but mighty.
So tell us a bit about your sporting background. I met you at Double Dragon. You were one of my kickboxing coaches originally in the beginning.
Yeah.
That's where I first experienced Mr. Delvicchio.
Yeah, so all throughout, I've been doing martial arts as long as I can remember, and at that time, I was just starting my undergraduate degree, if I recall correctly. So, regularly training in kickboxing and martial arts with my colleague and coach now sitting right next to me, and we used to have a lot of fun there. And he might even tell you a story or two of some of our world famous events in the boxing ring.
Oh, jeez. I think
Some of them didn't end very well for me.
Yeah, everyone's experienced it.
now there's all these
Outside of
rules and duty of care, but we didn't really care for each other as training partners. Let's put it that way. We just really tested ourselves, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. So so I've got a background in martial arts, of course, and the other martial art that I still currently do is kung fu. So I got to a Sifu level, you could say, in that system of Wu Chi. So I continue to train in kung fu at the moment.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you've also done some research as well. So we did a research on punching power in the bench press.
Yeah, we've and
We've done a few now, yeah.
Yeah, it has, and it's been building up quite nicely. And I suppose if I hadn't done a PhD in Masters Athletes, my other research interest was combat sport and martial arts. So we're very lucky to have, I think, only two of the devices in the country that measure...
Three now.
Three? Thanks. Three that measure force and power impact.
Yep.
So striking impact. And we've done a few studies, but an interesting one that we did was we looked at the relationship between bench press strength and punching power. And that's a rear cross punch. And what we found is the guys who had a bigger bench press actually had a stronger punch. So we certainly were able to show that there was a correlation in that group.
Yeah.
And can I just add, we'd like to thank Kevin Franklin and Mikey Wright, the inventor and the director for the Power Cube and Strike Mate, which have helped us do the research and helped our programs as well. So those devices, and we took us to the AIS, didn't it? And it was a great experience there.
Yeah, we're very lucky to be invited down to the AIS because they had this old East German device that was sitting on the wall that measures force impact, but they had no way of knowing how accurate it was because these devices are quite rare on the market.
Yeah.
So they contacted Hayes and said, well, we've got this device. We'd like to know if we can validate the numbers it's producing just to see if it's consistent. And so they invited us down. We took down one of the power cubes and the punching force from a number of the combat athletes in that unit down there at the AS who were part of the combat team were measured and they compared it and were able to determine just how accurate it was.
Cool.
You also need to have a good punch, though, because as we proved when I came to use it, I didn't follow through with my punch, so
You didn't use those thighs, Lauren.
it was disappointing.
The race-
I still got the best score out of all the girls in the group, but it was just not my strength wasn't displayed.
Must clarify though, the research was done on presently kickboxers.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Yeah,
important.
that was just me messing around on the cube.
Male kickboxers who were experienced kickboxers, and it was improvement in improving their bench press power. Essentially, which brought us
It was
up.
nice for you to have a taste of the research world as well, wasn't it?
Yes.
And it could be frustrating at times, can't it, Shannon?
Especially the program they ditched out that they wanted to give to us.
We're not going to mention any names.
I told Luke that program wasn't going to fly.
No, that was an interesting conversation. I've gone back to my research team saying, well, we've got a problem here.
Was there other groups that did the same thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there was two groups. This was the interesting part of that study, and sorry, this is referring to another study we did where we actually looked at the effects of a 6 weeks of strength and power training
Yep.
on punching power. Where the first one we talked about was simply a correlation study just to see if there's any relationship between bench press strength and punching power. So this second one, the group that was doing it here, Warrior Performance in Sydney, well, there was a parallel group doing it in Rockhampton at the same time.
And so did they go with the original plan? Or did they
the plan was consistent.
Oh, okay, right.
But we
Because
certainly...
that would have been interesting to see.
Yeah, no.
If they all just died and then
yeah.
our guys stayed strong.
No, the plan was consistent
Yeah.
across both.
And didn't you get some weird feedback when trying to submit that study?
That study is under review. We're currently working on a second round of revisions.
Yep.
So it's been reviewed and
Really, still?
So there's a bit more work to be done to get that one over the line. So
Yeah.
still some questions. Well, the questions relate to a little bit about how the load was progressed. So we used a term called linear load progression.
Yep.
So we said essentially the program, the sets and reps were pretty constant. We just tried to increase the weight.
Yeah, 5 or 2.5 kilos.
So, the word linear load progression isn't something that's commonly cited in research literature. So we're still working on that, for example.
And they had a bit of a bone to pick about not containing any plyometrics.
Well, when you say a power program, the first thing most people expect to see are plyometrics. That's right. So we used a couple of ballistic strength exercises or ballistic power exercises like squat jumps, but barbell squat jumps. So that was another question that got raised, and there's some interesting discussion.
Barbell squat jumps. We have people doing that here all the time here in Warrior Performance.
Can you clarify what you mean? What's the issue with plyometrics?
No, he one of the guys that reviewed the paper said it wasn't consistent with the other literature because there was no plyometrics involved in the program. And say exactly, like that's the whole point. Like we didn't need them to improve power. Like,
right.
And he's saying, well, that doesn't make sense because that's what the other literature shows. And it's like, well, it does because that's so.
right.
Yeah, so that was quite interesting feedback.
And this is where
part of the research.
This is a classic example where you've got field practitioners and researchers look at things very differently from a research point of view, and then when you actually do something in the field, sometimes the methods that are getting used, and we see it all the time in the field from coaches and so forth. Well, they're usually ahead of literature, but of course it just hasn't been shown to be true. So,
what are some of the limitations you see in the research at the moment? Essentially, like with exercise.
I'll use that study as an example. It's certainly it's hard because if you recruit, you're using coaches who are using certain methods, coaching methods. A lot of these methods haven't actually been researched, but the coach knows they work, the athlete knows they work, so they're anecdotal, if you want to use that term. And that can be hard because if you are going to use coaches when you're going to do a field study and you're going to try and validate certain methods, some of the things they're doing because they haven't been researched then get questioned, and this is the battle we face. Well, we've got to get them researched first, then apply the research, and that always can't be done. So that's the biggest problem at the moment, is trying to get researchers and applied practitioners on the same page.
Yeah, and then what about like we were discussing last time? Sometimes some of the research can be debatable because technique then becomes an issue, and you don't know how the technique was executed on certain lifts and stuff like that. Which is like
it's another variable. It is, and it's something. It is a variable in the study most days, which probably doesn't get a lot of attention.
Yeah.
They squat and they squat from point A to point B, but there's not a lot of detail on how they got from point A to point A, for example.
Yeah.
So certainly you begs the question. Well, how much an effect does it have when a person's being coached in a study to do squats? They're doing squats and they're coached a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And probably the parallel I could draw there is that a study that we did at Central Queensland University, one of the last ones I did before I left, and they looked at the effects of different voice instructions on counter movement jump performance. So basically, participants came in, stood on a force platform, and listened to a recorded instruction to jump.
Yeah.
Now, this was a difference in gender, but also a difference in the actual instructions to jump. So one of the instructions was just to jump, another one was to jump as fast as you can.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that study actually showed, and what we found is there is actually a difference in performance when you're coached
Yeah.
Yeah.
when your coach gives you a different cue.
Yeah.
So, we could probably draw a bit of a parallel there
Yeah.
to those findings and say, well, yeah, it probably does matter how participants are coached, and it does matter how they do the lift, and it might make a difference, and it's something that needs further investigation.
Yeah. 100%. So you've also did research on masters athletes as well.
Yep. So the topic of my PhD was to look at the effects of concurrent resistance or weight training and sprint training. And the reason I was asked to do that is there's a big gap in masters athletes or masters sport in the sprint side of things. So we know a lot about endurance, and you only have to look outside on the weekend to see how many middle-aged men in Lycra are riding a bike. Mammals. Which I better not do that, because as soon as I put on Lycra, I fit into that category. So we know a lot more about endurance performance than we do sprint performance. So the two things we wanted to know is, A, can we improve sprint performance with age in not a general population, but an athletic population, trained. And the second thing is, can we further improve it by adding weight training to the sprint training? So if they do concurrent training, which is, can we get further improvements? Now, we know we can do that with younger athletes, but with older athletes, at that time we weren't sure. There'd only been one study that had looked at the effects of sprint running, so 100-metre sprint running. And he actually, that study, or the author of that study, was my co-supervisor, Marko Korhonen, over there in Finland, had done that, and with another researcher by the name of Christia. So those guys had nailed that question pretty comprehensively, that yes, weight training can help sprint performance, sprint running. So what was left was cycling or swimming, so I chose cycling. And
hence your obsession with mammals.
Yeah, that's it. And the thing was that we were in Rockhampton, and I had to go and try and find enough track cyclists to do the study, and guess what? There isn't that many. And there is even fewer older track cyclists, so it's hard enough to find young track cyclists. How many of you guys know a track cyclist? There's a few, but
I know one. He's in London.
I mean, so it's a pretty special population. So we couldn't really find enough track cyclists, so we then had to convert the local competitive road cyclists into track cyclists and really reframe the whole question, because they weren't sprint trained from the beginning. So it was, and then became, well, can we improve road cycling performance by adding sprint training or adding sprint training and weight training? So that's what we ended up having to manifest the research question into, because the original one was, let's get some sprint guys who are already sprint training and see if adding weights makes a difference.
How did they take to that change from road to sprint?
Well, to start with, I had to track down a track cycling coach, because I have no background in track cycling. It's a very specialised field. And so I went looking all over the country, and I found a guy by the name of Jerome, who was a former French track cycling champion in France, and he's now living here in Canberra. And he's a strength and conditioning coach as well, and I met him at a strength and conditioning conference by chance. And he put his hand up to help me, and he actually wrote a track cycling program, because I really wouldn't have been much help, and it was hard to get. It's a really protected area. I found that the whole track cycling industry wasn't easy to get help. They were pretty protective of their spaces, and people weren't that forthcoming in sharing programs and ideas, and months and months of communication was coming up empty, and I was starting to get worried. I've moved all the way to Rockhampton. I don't even, I have to run a track cycling program. At one point I thought I was just going to have to make one up.
And then, so what were tell us about the results of the study?
So we converted these road cyclists into track cyclists, and we got them to undertake 2 track cycling sessions a week. And one group of road cyclists just did that only, and then another group did the track cycling plus weights. So we had to pull them off the bike on the road. We said, you're going to have to give up some of your road rides, and that wasn't an easy thing to negotiate. You can imagine what these road cyclists like. They like being on the bike every day. So we managed to convince most, but not all, and I dare say throughout the study they didn't all comply. But so we pulled them off the road a couple of times a week and replaced some of their road cycling sessions with weight training sessions or track cycling. And that went on for 12 weeks. So they did a weight training program, and because I was on my own, I'd had very little help. The weight training program was very simplistic. It was machine based, because I just with free weights and having 12 guys in a gym on my own and not having enough squat racks, bench presses. And a bigger reason was, when I was doing some of the jump testing, the initial testing with them, the power testing, they have a lot of trouble jumping. Cyclists don't jump, and you can understand why. If you're sitting on a bike and that's all you do, you're not going to jump real well. But I had some real concerns about their coordination.
Like swimmers that have great coordination
and
on land.
Some of these people had never really done weights. So, the average age was in the early 50s. So, they had a very little or limited training background or training history in weights. So they did a weight training program, but mostly machines. So essentially at the end of 12 weeks, we did see an improvement in sprint performance. So we got them faster. That was one of the questions. We got them stronger. The major change that we saw that we reported on was also the increase in muscle mass. So we used DEXA scans and we had a look at their muscle mass, and we're quite interested to see that the leg muscle mass, so the thigh lean mass, improved significantly. So whereas in some of the other groups, in the control group, for example, that all stayed pretty similar, and some were starting to show evidence of a decline. So if anything, adding weights to even the road cyclists need to do it because
just to keep that atrophy away.
Which is one of the important things about age.
And then what about their performance benefits? So how did that?
So they've improved their sprint performance was the major performance benefit. We didn't see an improvement in the jumping power or instantaneous power, but we believe that was more to do with coordination than it was actually a lack of adaptation. So they improved muscle mass, improved sprint performance, and maintained fitness. Now this is the other thing, is we pulled them off the bike. So you've got this fear they're going to lose aerobic conditioning. Well, they didn't. The great news is that the concurrent group, no, they maintained it. So they were doing 4 extra sessions a week, and so that means they were sacrificing at least 2. We asked them to sacrifice 4, and as I said, with compliance, we think on average the under-reporting probably means that they gave up 2 sessions. But they still didn't lose. Some did give up before, but no one lost aerobic fitness. So the sprint training obviously was a part of that as well.
And did you, like, speaking to them personally and stuff like that, did they find that their actual road cycling ability improved as well?
Now this is the great part, and I'm glad you asked that, because the anecdotes were amazing, and a lot of them were like, I'm getting up hills faster now, and where I used to come, when we're racing, as soon as I hit the hill I would fall to the back of the pack, but the comments where I'm getting up the hill faster, or I'm getting to the front of the pack more. So we had a lot of them reporting these improvements on the road, which is what's meaningful to them as well. So, they were able to see a direct benefit from the weight training.
That's cool.
Which is awesome.
How many of those who participated continued their weight training post the study?
That's a great question, because
did anyone like the weight training?
they all enjoyed it, but they needed to be supervised, and a reason why they didn't comply after, like, they knew all the benefits, they saw the benefits, they felt the benefits, they understood it,
but no one was there guiding them.
Correct. Without a coach, without accountability, they went back to, as far as I understand, just mostly road cycling.
So there's obviously a big market for. It's an aging population. How do the fitness professionals or coaches and strength people make weight training, resistance training more appealing for those people? Any suggestions? Because we know there's lots of benefits.
There is. I just don't. I think a big part of that is these old people or the community members just understanding what they are, because they might hear mixed messages. They don't really truly understand why they need to do it. And it's got to be personal to them. So, if you've got a man in his 50s or 60s who's already got big thighs, you're not going to convince him to do weights because our study shows that your thighs will grow. That's not going to resonate with him, is it?
They need the reward to create the habit.
They've got to have the reward, that's right, and it's got to be meaningful to them. It's got to be something that's specific to their goals.
Do you train any masters athletes or people of a certain age, Shannon?
I'm a masters athlete here.
Oh, really?
Almost.
What do you mean almost? I've been a master's athlete for 3 years.
What is the age?
35.
35.
Yeah.
The general definition of a master's athlete, if I can quote Professor Peter Rayburn from Bonn University, is anyone aged 35 competing for, or training for, or competing in organised sport. So for those of you like me who are training for something, we don't know what it is, but I'm always training for something.
Training for something.
Training for life.
Training for life. I'm training for an event.
So it's fair to say we're all masters athletes.
I have a few sub-masters records. So once I knew I was a sub-master, I was like, I'll just embrace it. Now I'm looking forward to 40 because there's a whole bunch of new records.
No, but I train a fair few masters athletes. The thing I've noticed with most of them essentially is just recoverability. Essentially, we have to give them less volume than we would a younger athlete
And that's interesting because one of the other things that we researched, and my colleague Natai Borges, Dr. Natai from Newcastle University, his thesis, he was doing his PhD at the same time as I was, and he actually looked at recovery. And what he did as part of some of his research is he had the Masters athletes come in and do a series of bike sprints, the Wingate protocol, so 30-second sprint with increasing resistance. It's tough.
Yeah.
So they had them do a large bout of HIIT, or high intensity interval training, and then they took a number of blood measures. And at the end of his studies, looking at Masters athletes and how they tolerate higher intensity training, and is they weren't able to find any biological explanation why they were tired. They were definitely tired, so there's no doubt that they were reporting their psychological reports showed excess fatigue following the HIIT training.
Yeah.
So their perception of fatigue was significant, but the biological markers, things like the creatine kinase, the markers of muscle damage, there was no significant increase. So we didn't get a biological explanation, but we got a psychological explanation that as we age, and this is an area that needs a lot more research, and we certainly don't have a great understanding, but there's something happening centrally. It's that central fatigue phenomenon that following something vigorous, older athletes tend to perceive the fatigue.
Yeah, but like you were also just measuring metabolites and stuff like that, and what about obviously nervous system fatigue, which is you can't really measure.
Well, that was because they were doing cycling. They were looking more at metabolite build up, maybe some sort of markers of muscle damage, metabolite markers. But
but obviously they're tapping into something that's obviously draining them, because it's obviously not just like thinking because they're old, because I get a lot of people that they're old and they don't think they're old and they try and train like they're young. You can't train like that anymore, and you pull them back and then they excel. So sometimes it's not.
Yeah, and that's another interesting question, because another gap in the research is do Masters athletes decline in performance because they stop training as hard and as frequently as a younger athlete, or they just lose that ability to recover and adapt? And it's another gap that we're trying to work out at the moment. Researchers are trying to work out whether that decline that we see with age in all types of performance, strength, power, speed, endurance, the natural inclination for a lot of Masters athletes, their goal is not to train as frequently or as intensely, and some obviously are different. But a lot of them, we suspect that the decline might be explained by just their training habits rather than something we can measure biologically as well.
And maybe the factor of overall life responsibility as opposed to a younger athlete.
That's right.
You got kids, you got family, you've got a lot of things going on. If you own or run a business or something like that, obviously those are big factors which you can't measure with metabolites. It's just going to play on your brain, and maybe just going to be more fatigue going into a session or coming out of a session.
More external stresses.
You don't get to sit at home and sit on the couch and rest and recover because you're doing something with your family or something like that, or sorting something out at work, or something that maybe a younger athlete doesn't have. And then also comes into the question of protein resistance, the anabolic resistance.
Well, the third, that's a good lead into the third study that was done by our group. So this time it was Dr. Tom Doring. His research looked at protein metabolism following muscle damage exercise, so downhill running. So they were doing quite deliberate muscle damaging exercise. They chose downhill running, and wanting to look at the effect of higher protein doses versus lower protein doses on recovery. So this time he used a cohort of triathletes as well, because they needed to be able to run. And what he found, what Tom's research found, that certainly higher amounts of protein and more frequently led to better recovery in Masters athletes. So as you alluded to, what might be driving that? Why do they need more? Well, a big part of that's that whole anabolic resistance phenomenon that occurs in sedentary older adults, but in Masters athletes as well. So getting enough protein is very important for those reasons.
And then what some of the numbers or some of the other research on that anabolic resistance phenomenon?
Well, for example, a lot of studies have shown they almost need double the dose. So if a younger person, for example, takes 25 grams, they recommend around the 25 gram mark. Masters athletes, it's going to be 40 plus grams is what it's going to take to A, combat the anabolic resistance, but B, also then
stimulate that muscle protein synthesis. Interesting. And
and that's very hard in endurance athletes because
they just
don't forget this applies also to the endurance athlete who wants to recover for the next session, the next day, or even that afternoon. They're not used to, they don't habitually eat protein.
Yeah.
And that was the hardest thing that Tom was, he was speaking to me about. He's looking at their food logs. It was very little protein. So that was a lot of work to put them on a high protein diet.
Yeah, and there's still a few myths out there about high protein that you hear circulating.
A lot of people, especially endurance athletes, sort of discount that protein side of thing because they think, I don't want to bulk up, but the dosage of protein is dependent on body weight. That's how you determine how much protein someone needs. So if you're going to stay at a body weight, you'll eat the protein for that body weight, just not eat in excess. So you just eat the amount of protein that you need, and then the rest of your calories are going to be made up, especially if an endurance athlete is going to be predominantly carbohydrates.
Correct.
And then a percentage of fat, whatever you need to obviously maintain normal hormonal function and everything like that.
Yeah. So certainly it's a big area for master sport in general. It's just getting that education across to them that they're going to need to do a few things, and one of the things is definitely eat more protein regardless of your sport. All master athletes
and lift weights.
So tell us more about masters athletes. So what
I think another thing it's interesting to talk about is how they're exemplars of successful aging, and the whole topic on aging well. Is probably interesting and important to most people when they think about their life. Being able to keep yourself as well as you can be for as long as you can be is a pretty important goal to most people.
Bone health especially goes with that.
Yep. And what we know about masters athletes is they're exemplars of successful aging because they get this really nice combination of exercise and socialisation. And that's why there is a difference. You've got training and you've got sport, and what does sport offer that training mightn't? And I reflect a lot of the times that I've run older adults fitness classes and older adults exercise classes in general. You typically don't see the strong social engagement you might at the end or at the back, and you try to build that up. But what sport offers is that strong social interaction engagement. And outside of, really a lot of experts believe that social interaction is a key determinant of longevity anyway.
Absolutely.
So if you really want to maximise your lifespan and age as healthily as you can, you want to get that balance between the right amount of exercise, good dose of exercise, and lots of socialisation. And that's where masters athletes and masters sports is doing a really great job. It's getting people to train for a purpose and giving them a goal and getting them into a team environment. Not all the master sports in team environment, but they're generally even the individual sports still train.
Oh, absolutely. Even powerlifting, it's like an individual sport, but we've still got a lot of sportsmanship. We've got a lot of great friends
and support around you, and you've got colleagues, you've got coaches, so you're still getting that interaction. And that's the key thing.
And that's why all the old people survive when they swim down the beach at Cronulla through the rock pools, or rock pools all around the world. They're all old and they're out there in the 1 degree water when it's cold temperatures, but they're long living lives because they're all together.
Socially. So that's a really interesting area of masters athletes, and it sort of resonates with people. How do I have this long healthy life? And it's never too late to get involved in some form of sport. There's some great examples of 90-year-old shot put competitors in some of the Masters games, and 80-year-old sprinters, and just doing things that most people perceive as being abnormal, but really what's abnormal is aging, sedentary lifestyles.
Sitting on the couch and not moving.
That's biologically to our bodies isn't normal. It's an abnormal stimulus. And we can draw on that from Masters athletes.
So the body's designed to move.
Absolutely, right through the lifespan, and it's plastic. The other word is plasticity. So that body remains that plasticity, that ability to adapt. You can continue to gain muscle mass throughout the lifespan. You can continue to learn new skills, and this is the other area of masters athletes. It's that motor skill development. Be a lifelong learner. Go and pick up a different sport later in life. And you'll get a whole host of beneficial neural effects. The brain, but the cognitive benefits that we talk a lot about in martial arts training, for example, how martial arts training offers all these wonderful cognitive benefits along with the physical. The sport can do that, particularly if you're learning a sport for the first time.
Well, Shannon's your oldest masters athlete at the moment, Val. So she, probably a year ago, fell over in the gym, landed on a bum on the concrete floor, just got up, carried on.
Yeah.
So,
I
like,
mean,
my
if-
mum's friend fell over,
Yep.
tripped over a dishwasher
Yes.
last week, broke her leg,
Yeah,
snapped
there you
straight
go.
away.
Yeah.
Like, no,
Yeah,
it's
there you
just...
go.
So
Yeah.
most people, like, she fell over. She tripped pretty hard.
Yeah, like, it wasn't just a little stumble. She
But she
stacked
got up
it.
and she was all right. She
Yeah.
was all right after, but
Yeah.
it would have broken most
Yeah.
50-plus-year-old hips. So she's like, what, 56?
She's 57,
Yeah,
yeah.
57
Well, in one
now.
of your presentations, Luke, there's an image or MRI of the comparison of two the muscles of a masters athlete and someone that doesn't exercise. What was it?
Yep, there's a couple there. That one you're referring to is an MRI of
Yes.
the quadriceps of the thigh. So it's a cross section of the thigh muscle, and it shows. It's a very powerful anecdote on the difference between someone who continues to engage in a high level activity. So there's a comparison between a 70-year-old triathlete and a 40-year-old who's sedentary.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there's very little different. I think the 70-year-old muscle looks like there's slightly more muscle mass, and I mean, you got that quite a large 30-year age span difference.
It's a great image.
That just shows how very little you really can bend the aging curve.
Yeah.
And you bend it really well when you engage in not just sport, but the training that goes with the sport.
Yeah.
And that's the package. You get the right sort of training, that systematic training that is training you for an outcome or a purpose and a goal, and you've got the sport and the engagement. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. There's also a lot of research on all-cause mortality, and one of the biggest predictors is leg strength and grip strength. So
Really?
Yeah, that's climbing the charts. You're right about that, and for a long time we know the relationship between aerobic fitness and longevity, but the data's showing it's that leg strength and just strength in general. It's a phenomenon known as dynapenia.
Yeah.
So we've all probably heard of sarcopenia,
Yeah.
the poverty of the flesh, the Latin translation, that wasting of the muscle mass.
You speak Latin now, do you? Jeez. Oh, right.
Little birdie helped me with that one, to be honest. And a certain presentation coach.
Poverty of the flesh. I like
certain
that.
presentation coach helped me with that one. But yeah, so that slide really reinforces also the health message, the public health message.
TonyKiss.com. That was a
Yeah.
plug for
Tony
him.
Kiss.
That was-
Yeah.
Thank you, Tony.
I knew who you meant straight away.
So we've got these aging phenomenons. We've got muscle wasting or sarcopenia, and then we've got, as you've alluded to, this strength loss or dynapenia, which is this abnormal decrease or decline in strength.
Yeah.
That's happening independent of the change of the muscle mass, and they're both important predictors of longevity because, simply put, that disability threshold, that ability to maintain basic daily function, relies a lot on strength.
Yeah. 100%.
So those measures, when they reach a critical point, an elderly person, if they can't rise out of a chair, if they can't open jars, if they can't cross the road in time when the light switches green, which it's funny.
Shannon, you struggle with that one?
I do.
No one wants to run him over there. They'll fuck the car up.
It's the first thing. I was driving to the airport and there was this poor little old lady crossing the road, and I was in a bit of a hurry and getting a bit frustrated with the time it was taking to cross the road. And then I started to think, look at the gate, it's just the red light had stopped flashing. She hadn't even made it halfway.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And there's a great example of this slow gait, that inability, which is in effect power as well.
Yeah.
All those attributes, those physical attributes, just to get her across the road in time. Now, the light was green, she was still crossing.
Yeah.
There's a great example of dynapenia. She just couldn't produce the muscle force necessary to accelerate a gait.
You should have said something to her, Luke.
He did. He probably beeped at it and cursed at it out the window.
Yeah, but another thing is just them getting up off the ground. Like if you fall over and you don't have the leg strength to get back up, or the grip strength to hold onto something to help pull you up, then if you fall over, you're injured, you break something, you start bleeding or whatever, and you can't pull yourself up and get to the phone and call
Or
an
even just
ambulance or whatever,
psychologically.
then you're even, well, a lot of people end up dying in their house because they
Yeah.
have a fall and they
Yeah.
die straight away. Sometimes they were just lying there
They
for
couldn't
ages
get up.
and no one came
Yeah.
because maybe they don't have any other family or anything like that. So obviously that's sort of like a big concern as well.
Yep, and no doubt all that's contributed as to why we see that relationship between longevity and strength.
Can we go back to what we spoke about earlier about your wife, her experience and why she became a masters athlete? Because you spoke of the benefits, but can you just share the story and how this all happened?
Yeah, well,
From nowhere.
It is, and so the story of it's kind of an interesting one because when we moved to Rockhampton, she, not that I like to give away my wife's age, but she just turned 40. and never played any organised sport in her whole life. And she comes from the Philippines, so in a country like the Philippines, they don't get a lot of opportunity to play sport like we do. So she got dragged into a local hockey team up there, because that town, everyone plays hockey. And that's it. So,
Wow.
And if you're free on the weekend and someone finds out you're not doing anything on Saturday, you're playing hockey.
Rockhampton, really?
Yeah. So, they're famous. You got to think. I think it's like 3 up to 4 maybe of the current Australian or previous Australian hockey team
From there?
players have come from Rockhampton.
Okay.
Cool.
So it's a famous breeding ground for hockey players. And so she's very quickly got dragged into a hockey team, and she's like, "What do I do? I've never played sport in my life. Like, what's hockey? Didn't even know what hockey was. Never played a field sport before in her life." And all of a sudden, she's getting dressed up and putting on shins pads, and where do they go? And anyway, so she's out there playing hockey with the local team there in Rockhampton, and that's just flowed into an opportunity to play for a rep team, because they were short one particular time. So she played for one of the Queensland representative tournaments, and that went into the Pan Pacific Masters, and
So cool.
it just goes on and on,
Just
and I
from
can't
nowhere.
keep up. Yeah,
Just from
the
nowhere.
thing is, no sport in the whole life, and
To now kicking ass over in Malaysia, beating Swedish males.
And the benefits for her health.
and now she goes to the gym for a purpose. So
Yeah.
for her, weight training is purposeful.
Yeah.
Because she wants to stay on the park. She doesn't want a hamstring strain or
Yeah.
a back strain, which she's seeing all around her. A lot of the colleagues that she plays with, her friends, they're all falling down like flies. And so she needs to be strong. She recognises the benefits of strength training to that sport, and she needs to be able to sprint. And so she's got this purposeful training, and she's made friends all over the country because she's played for all these different teams. So
Yeah,
she's
that's
broadened her
great.
social connection.
Yeah.
Social connectedness is so important.
Yeah.
And she's got all this new skill set.
Yeah.
So there's not very often I walk in the house, there's hockey balls flying around, and so it's that ability to create that enthusiasm again, that physical enthusiasm
Yeah.
that you mightn't get if you were just going to the gym without that purpose.
Yeah, that's very interesting what you said about Rockhampton. I think it's something that people don't realise, is that the environment that you're in, it can really shape you as an athlete, which is people discount it a lot. Like, obviously, if you're in a good gym and you're a kickboxer, you got a lot of good kickboxers, they generally tend to produce good kickboxers, or like Rockhampton are producing good hockey players because everyone there is playing hockey, and then you learn, even if someone's not directly teaching you, you learn because you see things, you hear things, you pick all these things up, and then it just shows within what you're producing, and then you get better. And I think that's probably something a lot of people don't sort of realise if you're just surrounded by it. So like, she'd be like an unlikely candidate to ever think that she's going to be a gold medalist in field hockey. Do you know what I mean? But it doesn't, like, people put a lot of stock in genetics, but you've got to put a lot of stock in the environment. I think is probably probably one of those bigger things that's going to change people more than the actual just the genetics.
Yeah,
I
agree.
And how about your personal journey competing as a Masters athlete?
I thought this story might come up. So,
Well, that's why I'm here, right?
well, so I was sort of in the middle of all this Masters athlete research. I
This
thrown
craze.
myself in this craze, and surrounded by my wife doing all these wonderful things. And I thought, I've got to do something here. I can't just be a bookworm. So there was the Australian Masters Games. This is 2016 in Adelaide. So I was looking at what's available, what sport what's there. And sure enough,
Looks like I'm just going to learn a new sport and get a gold medal.
Well, it was
Pretty
too hard
much.
to do a team sport because I just was in Rockhampton on my own. I didn't really, so the only thing that came up was Taekwondo, and I thought, why did I choose Taekwondo? Because it's a combat sport, and given my martial
That's
arts
the closest
background-
thing.
Yeah, so I signed up, and I had an interesting. I rang the organizer, and he's a highly esteemed Taekwondo black belt organizer, a couple of different Taekwondo organisations, I think the ITF. And he's having this funny conversation. So, who are you? I said, my name's Luke. And he goes, so what Taekwondo school? No, I'm not from any Taekwondo school. I'm just going to do it in the backyard. I've got a boxing bag. I've got a garage with some lights. This is a true story. I said,
What belt are you?
and what belt? And I said, just put me the black belt.
What belt am I? Black. You're black.
And I just said, just put me the black belt. I'm pretty sure I'll be okay. Because I'm backyard trained, I've got a kickback, So,
We've got good videos of that as well.
he had a really good laugh at me, but I thought I needed to get involved. I needed to experience Masters sport. So I sure enough, I
Set
flew
up your
down.
own style of Taekwondo?
Yep. I did enlist a local Taekwondo instructor to give me a few lessons along the way, and then went down to the Masters Games in Adelaide. and proceeded to lose in the first round by disqualification. And I came out pretty bruised, had a pretty big bruise on my head and on my eye, and because it got a bit wild, I thought it was something closer to MMA than Taekwondo, because I didn't actually bother to rule. But it's even funnier because there was this, there was a black belt from America there, and he's giving me this funny look the whole time. So I'm waiting around the actual matting area where they compete. And there's this guy who kept staring at me. And why is this guy staring at me, you know? And sure enough, he's actually come up to me and, oh, here we go. And he's gone, can I help you, man? You've got your belt on wrong. So I didn't even know. Like, I had my uniform.
Undies tucked up.
Completely out of order. You know, there's real etiquette to tying your belt up. And he's
just
like,
gone in there all scrappy and just destroyed the whole sport.
And he's like, I said to the American guy said, I said to my mate, I'm sure this guy's just walked off the street. And I said, I pretty much have. I got a mail order uniform. I trained in the backyard, and here I go.
But the funny thing is, the rules are so different. All the sparring and fighting we've done over the years has been full contact.
That's what I
like
really
brutal full contact.
Yeah.
And poor Luke tried to apply those rules.
That's what led to a bit of, there was an issue with disqualification, because I quickly realised you're not allowed to throw knees and elbows and
No headbutts and time.
Taekwondo is very different.
I went in for a football tackle and that got in trouble, so yeah.
But you did it. You did
yes,
it. You
and
did it.
yep, that was
Well,
great.
did you? Because you got disqualified.
No, you
So
got
can
there.
you tick that off?
No, I went to the the first 2 rounds were all legal. It was the third round, I think, that I lost too many points for too
Right.
many different tactics. So.
And you had you were sending me some interesting data at one stage. You were testing basically how many calories you were burning in different martial arts and exercise sessions. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, it's a device that measures your physical output. It's called a hexaskin, so it's a biometric shirt that has an accelerator in the shirt, accelerometer, in the shirt. Yeah. And that's how I was able to get these measurements of the energy expenditure in the grappling sessions or the Taekwondo sparring sessions that I was doing. So that particular shirt also measures heart rate and respiration. So it crunches some interesting variables or metrics, and certainly was interesting to see that some of the sessions were getting right up to close to 900, even 1,000 calories.
Some of the jiu-jitsu session.
The grappling session. Even that wasn't Taekwondo related. It was just general combat training. Yeah. And I suppose the message there was that those sorts of sessions, if you're doing weight training as well, are going to eat into your recovery. And I could certainly, I learned that the hard way.
If you're a 75 kilo male burning 800 calories in a training session, you're an MMA athlete or kickboxing athlete training 5-6 times a week, you probably need to really look at the amount of food you're consuming and
big time.
Really, and I mean, Hayes, I know you've worked with some of Hayes' athletes and they've experienced that they're under eating a fair amount, and then once you start feeding them, they start to actually lose weight.
People unfortunately get in this horrible paradox of wanting to lose weight but wanting to train effectively, and if you want to train effectively and have the energy to train effectively and then trying to lose weight where you're trying to be in a calorie deficit, those two things have to be very carefully planned, and the big problem seems to be people under eating and then complaining about being tired, particularly in their training session, and you've got to really crunch the goals with these people. What are you trying to achieve? And
I think boxing is probably one of the biggest culprits of this. Like, I see boxers and they're always trying to improve their fitness, do more running, do more conditioning, and it's like, guys eat like shit. Like, you fucking consume 900 calories today. Like, how do you expect that you don't need to do more conditioning, you just need to get some nutrients in your body, so when you go into that boxing section you actually feel good and you can actually perform on what your body is capable of. They're going in just really undernourished.
We've run a few high performance tests for amateur and professional boxers, and with the metabolism test, they all had quite high resting metabolism. However, one common theme was them always getting sick as we're getting closer to the event, and it was all about they weren't eating enough food. And I remember you saying, Luke, to one of the young ones, or both, just got to rice, get the rice in you, get something in you, because you're not eating enough. And they're running every day, they're training every evening, they're burning thousands and thousands of calories and just not eating. And they cut weight and they get sick and they fight no way near their peak.
100%. And I think their biggest thing is always worrying about that actual weight. But I've found when I used to do a lot of weight cuts for fighters, I start to feed them more food and they make weight a lot easier.
Right.
And then they just get a lot leaner, you know what I mean? They're not you're feeding them. It's not like they're going to grow like a bodybuilder. They're doing a sport that's not conducive to gaining body weight. That's what you got to understand. You're just feeding those muscles so they can get better contractions, and then those muscles will utilize that fuel because it's got more output essentially. So you're giving more food to get more output. You're not actually giving more food to store more food. So in the long run, because they got more output, they end up burning more body fat as well as a side effect of that. So I find that's one of those sort of big things. Can you want to speak on that a bit, Luke? Your experience
No,
with
well,
that?
that's certainly what we found. It's been a very common trend that we will do a resting metabolic rate test, which essentially tells the person how much they need to eat, particularly. And when we look at the food diaries that they bring in with them, they're severely under eating for their sport, and they just are caught in that horrible paradox of not, like you said, making weight or being concerned about their weight, but not understanding the relationship between performance and energy intake. So, and we're seeing more and more, like if you keep measuring your metabolism, it will go down with fatigue. So it's a pretty useful marker of over fatigue or overtraining in its own right.
Can you tell us a bit about the metabolism testing, because
you've run a few of them.
So
and some of the results and some of the things you've seen.
I think the most consistent trend is.
So tell us about the machine first. What is it?
We use a device.
So we, as in Australian Combat and Exercise, I don't think we introduced the company.
So at Australian Combat and Exercise, we use the FitMate.
We should have all wore our shirts.
It is a portable metabolic cart, so it's this technology sort of shrunk down a little bit so we can actually do the test in a office rather than being in a laboratory where you need an open circuit spirometry. So it's a lot less complicated, but still just as accurate. Importantly, the device stacks up very nicely to some of the more gold standard measures. And in that test, you'll lie down with a respirator on and breathe quietly for 10 to 15 minutes. At the end of the test, the information we gain is, firstly, we get a number in calories on how many calories burning a day, and that's referenced against a prediction, the Harris-Benedict equation. So and what we see and what's been interesting over the years is that based on that comparison, so when someone comes in for their age, gender, height and weight, if their score's 10% below what we predicted, it's in the slow category. That's how when we get a slow metabolism reading, how did we get slow? Where did that number come from? Well, that's where it comes from. And it's usually slow when someone's fatigued. And we know that because the food diary says that they're eating X amount, and that's usually a lot less than even what their basic bodily function requirement is, or their RMR. So they're under eating, and then you've got all this extensive training that they're doing. So like you said, they're creating more and more.
Resting metabolic rate, just elaborate on what that is. So
it's the energy that the body, and it's measured in calories. So it's resting metabolic rate is the amount of energy you need to run your basic bodily functions.
So that's just for you to get up in the morning and function. And not
what you would need if you were laid up in
work.
hospital in bed. So if you were laid up in bed in hospital and you had no option but just to lie there, your resting metabolic rate's a good indicator of what you would need just to maintain your.
So you need to cover that each day before you can even think about losing weight. And then on top of that becomes all the other calories you'll burn through just daily function, stress, and exercise.
Absolutely. And there's about 10% that comes from your thermal effect of food. So you can add another 10% particularly if you're on a high protein diet. You'll actually increase your thermal effect. So you'll actually.
And the FitMate machine that you use, how different is the data produced in that compared to those body scanning machines that people stand up and hold?
Look, I haven't. Look, to be honest, as far as I'm aware, there isn't any literature that's gone ahead and actually studied the differences in those numbers. But this is based on first principles, which is the direct measurement of oxygen extraction. So whereas they're definitely more of a prediction, and whenever you've got a prediction, an equation which uses prediction, there's going to be more error. So.
And that's essentially the gold standard in what they use in research to predict the person's metabolic rate. So when they're doing a study where they add or subtract calories, they can give them they can start from their baseline. Essentially,
that's right. The only thing the device doesn't have is a carbon dioxide unit. So in the gold standard measures that you get in a lab, you'll get oxygen and carbon dioxide, and that's off. The advantage of that system is it gives you a respiratory quotient.
All right, go.
What's most interesting about the metabolism testing and the data we've collected over the hundreds we've done over the years is 90% of people have a normal metabolism.
So I was getting to that. That's right. So outside of the other trend where we see undereating, but most people who overeat And they're the people coming in, I want to lose weight, and they might well be overweight, and they're absolutely sure that their metabolism's slow, but it's very rarely the case. And you simply, if you were to put in their weight, their height, and their age into the Harris-Benedict equation, you'd actually see that their metabolic rate, from what we measure, is usually pretty close, if not on, if sometimes higher. So there seems to be some confusion about this whole slow metabolism thing, and we've rarely seen it over the years. It's an unnecessary...
It's an easy one to blame, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, a few people have been a bit disappointed with the result, haven't they, Luke? They've seen that the figure is normal, sometimes even fast, and they're overweight.
Yeah, that's a very hard conversation to have.
Yeah. Well, how much are you eating?
It
Well,
is.
not much. Well, how much are you really eating?
Yeah.
What about the stuff no one watches you eat? Those secret eaters.
And unfortunately, that's their anchor. I've got a slow metabolism. That's been their anchor maybe for a long time. So
Yeah.
when you take that anchor away, they're left vulnerable.
Yeah.
And we can blame the media perhaps for that, because it's just such an easy thing to write about or talk about, or blame the slow metabolism, but it just rarely plays out. We rarely see it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the thing people don't consider is they don't consider how much they move each day, so people don't track their steps. So a lot of people, I'm hard time losing weight, and they're actually dieting, but then we go, okay, let's track your steps. You sit at a desk all day, and then you drive home and like park in your garage, you walk into your house, you're lucky to get 2,000 steps a day. Of course you're not losing weight, you don't do normal human function movement, like you just can't really cut any more food out, otherwise you're just going to be starving. So some people just need to move more, and they need to move every day. People have just got lazier sitting at desks and stuff like that. And then also people don't track their food. I eat healthy. It's like, doesn't matter if you eat healthy, like
Do you eat too much healthy food? Yeah.
like
But even
you can eat too much healthy food, so people just eat shit, and then people snack and they pick at things, and then like I watch people eat all the time, and and they sit there and then they're eating stuff, and you're just looking going, that meal, you're a female, you just consumed like 900 calories at least. You consume close to what I'm consuming for my meal, and you're telling me that you're eating healthy. Like,
Are you talking about our first date?
pretty much. But yeah, that's like people just don't have any idea of how much they're putting in their mouth. Like, I went out and I had a pizza the other night, and I'm like, well, how much pizza do you have? Oh, we just shared a pizza, so you had half a large pizza. A pizza's 2,000 calories, right? So you just ate 1,000 calories, and you're a female that wants to lose weight. Like, if you're a female and you go out and you're going to have pizza, probably going to get one slice is what you're, maybe 2 slices is what you're going to be allowed. But a glass of wine and 1 slice of pizza, and you're not probably going to overdo your calories for that meal. That's the reality. But how many people do that? People just don't.
What was the figure, Luke? How incorrect the counting can be sometimes?
Look, there's a general agreement. There's a general agreement, and some literature I've seen says as high as 60. So,
oh wow,
yeah.
People will always underestimate how much they eat and overestimate how much they train.
Yeah. Oh well, the training is the biggest one, isn't it? Doing one session at the gym in an evening, burning 300 calories. Is not going to do anything.
Going, I can go out for a burger.
Yeah,
it's like, that burger's 1,000 calories. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, a lot of people just have no idea about what they're putting in their mouth, and they just don't know how much they move either. So I think it's not their metabolism that's slow, as we've seen a lot of time. Even people with thyroid issues, you've seen in there.
That's another, that's to our surprise, we've had people come in with diagnosed thyroid conditions who still are running a pretty reasonable metabolic rate, or certainly not slow based on that criteria that I previously mentioned. So once again, even with different conditions, the balance doesn't change. That equation, I should say, doesn't change. That, and so that's a lot of what the service provides.
That's great. All right. Well, anything else you want to speak on, Luke? We covered it all.
Yeah, I think it's been pretty well covered.
Awesome. So we've got Luke down here this weekend because we've got our next technical lifting seminar on Sunday.
We've got a few things this weekend.
So they've got your boxing course tomorrow.
This weekend.
Plug that a bit, Hayes? Tell us.
Yeah, I was just it's been a big week at ACE, Australian Combat and Exercise. As of today, our rebrand has begun, a new logo.
Yep.
For those that don't know, we're a sports science and education business. Dr. Luke is the head of the sports science component and high performance. This weekend, we're running some continuing education programs for fitness professionals and exercise scientists and exercise physiologists. Tomorrow's our boxing skills and fitness with the sports science boxing. When you hear this, it won't be tomorrow. However, it's Australia's most accredited boxing course. We have got a record attendance tomorrow of 26 people. And level 2 is on the Sunday, and also on Sunday at Warrior Performance, technical lifting with the science of strength training with these 3 individuals, hosted by Loz Green.
That's it. Flozzie G in the house.
Yes.
Hello, Sydney.
I think the program's just what a start it's been. Technical lifting. It started a couple of years ago when I started training with Shannon. And then realised I didn't know anything, didn't know shit about lifting weights. And then I said, Luke, come and check this guy out. Remember Shannon, the Poliquin guy?
And he said, fuck that guy.
Yeah, that's right. Then he came and did a session with Shannon and said, oh, fucking hell. I don't know shit either.
We all
And then we
fell a bit.
Started the process of building a technical lifting program. It's not a powerlifting course, but we do borrow a lot of the powerlifting principles.
Yeah.
We've had a number of powerlifters do the course and learn a fair bit. So technical lifting is going to change the way strength and conditioning and lifting weights is going to be done in the industry.
Yeah.
And we're already 4 courses in.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is our fourth.
We've done a few workshops, Shannon.
Yeah.
The feedback's been exceptional. We've had some really highly credentialed people attend the program. And this weekend's another sellout. Another sellout. We capped the course because we want to keep the education and the quality of tuition there. And for any fitness professional, strength coach, whether it's you're brand new or you've been doing it for 30 years, you must do this program. And Luke, you can share. Look, you wrote an article on why technical lifting. Can you quickly talk about why it's so important for exercise physiologists or those that have come out of education and been doing it that way for so many years to consider this method?
I think certainly for the exercise physiologists or even the personal trainers who probably for a while, like me, maybe struggled with the progression to the loaded variants of these lifts. There's progression. How do I get people safely to squat, to deadlift? These are definitely questions that come up in most gyms every day, that you can see it on the faces of trainers and some of the public gyms that I work out of. I see it in their faces. You can see somebody under a barbell who just shouldn't be there. And I suppose, like those trainers, even myself, it's like, well, what is this systemised process that I can implement to get that person to that position to do it safely?
Yeah.
What are the steps involved? How do I get from A to B? And we get a lot of courses dealing out some great information on the benefits of these lifts, but what appears to be missing a bit of a gap we've identified is how we get a person to that lift rather than just throwing them into the lift because we know how great they are and they do all these wonderful things. You get these great benefits. And in a rush to get those benefits, we forget the important little steps along the way. And it's that gap, it's that knowledge gap that we're trying to bridge. Because I think there's a lot of people out there who want to see their clients squatting, using the deadlift, using the bench press, or for that matter, doing lat pull as another variance that we cover a little bit better. They want to do it. I see their clients do it, and they're not really that confident. Yeah. So the word is confidence, and I think people out there would know that they lack that confidence in these steps that we teach in the course. These progressions will give you that confidence, so you can get to that point.
So if you listen to this podcast, if you contact us and mention StrengthCast, Warrior StrengthCast, we'll give you a discount.
Oh, how much?
Don't answer that question. Don't answer that.
I've got to crunch some figures first. Just mention the podcast. And also got some metabolism testing this weekend, and Luke will be back in November. And we'll probably have him here on a Friday for a seminar. We're probably looking at doing the sleep and stress seminar again. It's been a while, awesome. Which was great. So
it's a great seminar.
This is the first Luke's heard of this, but
Yep.
Sitting here going, okay.
No worries.
Yep. But if people want to get in contact with you guys about metabolism testing or anything like that,
our
or
website.
high performance testing, go to the website.
acexercise.com. That's acexercise.com, or call 1300 223 556.
And then if people want to follow you on social media,
yes, look up Australian Combat and Exercise on Facebook or Instagram.
Yep. And then Luke,
same thing.
Same thing. What he said.
The last time Luke tried to do this, he spelt the website wrong.
all right, thanks for coming on today, guys.
Thank you.
All right, cheers.
Thank you. See you guys.